Now, in what you can only call a major U-turn, the Prime Minister has announced a national mandatory inquiry into those grooming gangs.
Well, it comes in response to Baroness Casey's recommendation, who's been undertaking a national audit into the scandal.
Well, politically, the Conservatives and Reform are now demanding that Sir Keir Starmer apologise because he initially rejected the whole idea months ago, only allowing 5 councils to set up their own local investigations.
The government dismissed calls at the start of the year saying that a 7-year inquiry had already been led by Professor Alexis Jay and all those recommendations needed to be carried out before they did anything else.
But now we've got Baroness Casey's report, and it is expected to be released next week, and it is expected, well, it must have some bombshell news in it, mustn't it, because it's caused such a U-turn. It is expected now to openly link the scandal to men of Pakistani origin.
All right, let's talk to our national reporter, Charlie Peters, who's here. I mean, I'm staggered by this U-turn, Charlie. Not that it's not welcomed, because of course it is, because all right-minded people were saying this needs to be looked at on a national scale. It's the fact that it's gone from being jumping on a far-right bandwagon, if you were calling for this, to now saying, yes, we must have it.
Yeah, from the far right to government policy in just 5 months. It's quite the change. However, I would say, while it's politically difficult for Sir Keir Starmer to make that shift, the more difficult question for him, I think, is actually, why has it taken Baroness Casey's report? It's going to be absolutely damning when it comes out, possibly as early as tomorrow morning. But I think what will be in that report is stuff that journalists have been able to tell this government and previous governments for many years. We produced an investigation 2 years ago that found that over 50 different towns and cities have been affected by this scourge. We have been relentless in revealing cover-ups, political failures, police investigations that have gone awry. As recently as April, we spoke to a former police officer in Bradford who said that he was threatened with arrest when he tried to raise concerns about this issue. Last week, we had another bit of survivor testimony, someone coming forward and showing their horrendous ordeal in Telford, where there hadn't been sufficient action. So there's just been relentless information showing how widespread this failure has been. Why has it taken Casey to change this?
Since this announcement, you've had even more contacts from people who said, now maybe I have got the courage to speak out.
And I think that's one of the most reassuring things about this announcement. Obviously, there is a great feeling that justice delayed is justice denied. Many of the women and girls involved in this horrifying ordeal, they wait up to 20 years, sometimes longer, to get justice for their abuse. 2 days ago, 7 men were found guilty at Minshall Street Crown Court in Manchester for abuse that started in 2001. They will get heavy prison sentences in just a few weeks, I expect. However, for those survivors who were failed at that time, a lot of questions still haven't been answered. Why did, for example, a 10-year-old girl who was part of that trial, girl A, why was she described by social workers as a prostitute when concerns were first raised?
That in itself
10 years old. And why have those social workers never faced sufficient action? That is the question at the heart of this, because we've had some prosecutions, 400, I think, since 2000. We've had 1 deportation since 2011, but more action needs to be taken.
I'll tell you what strikes me with all of this is there's vast amounts of stuff from over the last few decades to get through on this, but it is also the fact that we know it is still going on.
Yeah, when we released that investigation 2 years ago with the 50 different towns and cities, the then government, with Home Secretary Suella Braverman at the time, they launched a grooming gangs task force on the back of what we'd uncovered. It made over 1,000 arrests in its first year. And people keep saying, oh, this is an issue of the past, Rotherham was the late 90s. No, this is a pattern of abuse that has never been properly dealt with. That's why this channel and so many other outlets have been focusing on it so intensely. And, you know, while we're waiting for this inquiry to set up, there is a lot more work to do. And we have another exclusive we can reveal this morning, which is that GBNews can reveal now that the Pakistan government has lobbied for its flag carrier, Pakistan International Airlines, to be able to fly to Britain in return for grooming gang offenders who were born in Pakistan being deported back to that country. Whitehall sources have told GBNews that 3 men born in Pakistan who were convicted of grooming gang offences are the subject of ongoing diplomacy between the British government and the Pakistani government. Now, Pakistan International Airlines remains banned from flying to and from Britain due to safety concerns. However, Whitehall sources have told me in the recent weeks that it has been the subject of high-level diplomacy, including the Foreign Secretary David Lammy and the Foreign Office Minister Hamish Falconer, between him and senior-level representatives from Islamabad. They have proposed, in exchange for accepting deported Pakistani grooming gang rapists, that in exchange for them being taken back to Pakistan, we should allow their airline to return flying to Britain.
That is sensational. And absolutely terrible to hear. But there is going to be growing evidence, and I know you've already uncovered a lot, of cover-up or whitewashing or just plain corruption here at high levels.
Corruption is the word that people are so scared of because it's the right word to use, and it absolutely is, because whenever we've discussed this issue, people have always thought, well, this was an issue of political correctness. People didn't want to get involved because they were concerned about being accused of racism. That is a big part of it, don't get me wrong. But it goes further than that. And that's why this statutory level investigation has always been needed when you speak to survivors and their families, because they know it wasn't just the fear of being tarnished with some language. They were also nervous about it being exposed, their links to these abusers. There are big questions to ask now, and perhaps Baroness Casey will answer some of them next week in her reports, about links between authorities and gangs, about kinship, about families, about cousin marriage, possibly. If your cousin is a police officer and your other cousin is a grooming gang offender, perhaps they could work together to support and protect each other. We're still working on a few stories along those lines, but hopefully that comes out soon.
Yeah, and that is the sort of information that we do need. It's going to blow the lid off that, hopefully. But amidst all of that, what is still the thing which I can't get my head round is the fact that throughout all of this, you've had children who are victims, who have been arrested, who have been, as you say, labelled as prostitutes. And,
children.
And all this sort of, which beggars belief. And it shouldn't matter who they are, what their background is, what their colour is, anything at all.
No, but we've been
if they are children, why are they being labelled in this way?
Haven't we been led to believe as well that they're all children from vulnerable families? As though there's something wrong with that. But it's, in fact, that's not true.
It's the most disgusting slur to say that it, in a sense, says to the victims that they are to blame in some way for what they endured because they came from, quote, troubled backgrounds. Here's another thing on that, which we need to focus on. There are many victims of this abuse who come from middle-class backgrounds, but have the additional layer of not wanting to speak up because they think that there is a type of survivor. Everyone's got to be from broken backgrounds. One more thing on that Pakistan Airlines story. It is extraordinary. We've also been told by Whitehall sources that the government was hoping to have a plan in place to deport all three of those men who are offenders, I understand, from Rochdale, before Baroness Casey's audit was released next week. So they were hoping to make a strong announcement about deportations. It may come soon. They may have reached an agreement with Pakistan, but this country notoriously does not want to accept deportations. As I said before, we've only had one sent back to Pakistan since 2011. I'm aware of more cases of grooming gang offenders fleeing to Pakistan than being deported. We also heard last night from the Shadow Justice Secretary, Robert Jenrick, who said it was pathetic that the government was getting on its knees and begging Pakistan to remove foreign rapists. We have reached out to the FCDO and to the Pakistani High Commission for comment, but we've yet to hear back from either.
All right, Charlie. We'll speak to you a little bit later on. For now, thank you.
It's exhausting listening to everything you have to say because there's so much, but don't get exhausted.
No,
there's so much more to do, very clearly, isn't it? And we're very glad you're on top of it for us.